Who do you have on top of this division for the 2026 season, Logan?
The competition is stiff, but I have the Oklahoma City Thunder repeating as Northwest Division champions. And I think the real question is just how much better is Oklahoma City going to be? And is it going to be reflected in their record? This is a team, Carson, that last year was 68-14. And they faced a lot of adversity, right? This wasn't like a peachy keen, easy 68-14. That's what I want to hammer home. I mean, for the beginning of this season, they're missing Isaiah Hartenstein. They're missing Chet Holmgren. They have Jalen Williams fill in at the 5 spot for a majority of the beginning of the year. And,
well, yeah, like a handful of games.
I mean, and then, well, I mean, eventually they do get Hartenstein, but you miss Holmgren for a large portion of the year. And then they almost don't miss a beat. Like, it's really impressive to me that this team was able to be this successful while facing that kind of injury luck. But the big question for me this next season really does focus on the young guys. It's really rare for a team to be this dominant and this young. Like, the big swing factor to me is just how much better do some of these young guys get. And it starts, I think, with Chet Holmgren offensively with what he brings you. But it can also go down the roster to a guy like Cason Wallace, like Aaron Wiggins. Does J-Dub get any better, right? Does Isaiah Joe get better? You've got Nicola Topic, who should be healthy this season. So I do think there's a lot of room for improvement for a team that is so young and was so successful last season and just won the title. So to me, it's not, is this team going to be great? Are they going to fall off? Is there going to be some championship hangover? I'm just kind of looking, how much better is this team going to be this season? Because I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I just don't know how it's going to be reflected in their record.
I also obviously have the Thunder atop this division. I think that they are the best team in the league. I have them winning 64 games this year as my 1 seed. I will say all my record predictions flexible to change by maybe a game or two once all is said and done, because I got to make sure the league ends with a 500 even record, which I haven't done yet. But regardless, the Thunder will have the best record in the league in my preseason predictions by multiple games. I think it's going to be another utterly dominant regular season for them. They retain every single rotation player from a team that just had an utterly dominant championship season, and they were the youngest team to win it all since 1977. So that's where you talk about the opportunity for improvement, potentially significant improvement from a team that already was so great. It's really a rare thing in the history of this game to see. And I do want to get into some of those swing factors that can ultimately determine what this team's absolute ceiling is. But first off, the reason that they have to be viewed as, to me, still the favorite to win the title this year is because that all-time great defense that they had last year is going to be replicated. They had a -7 relative defensive rating in the regular season. That was the best by any champion since the 04 Pistons. And now they're actually going to have their best defender for hopefully the entire season. You mentioned they had 50 games without Chet. We have never seen a defensive unit with this level of speed. It is absolutely absurd, and this level of ability to cause chaos defensively. They have elite switchability. They have elite rim protection. They have so many high-quality defenders, but what they do in a truly one-of-a-kind way is force turnovers, make opposing teams uncomfortable, speed them up, and then turn defense into offense. It's the greatest strength of their identity as a team. They overwhelm you in that way, and they have an answer for everybody. They can excel in every single matchup on the defensive end. That was their biggest strength last year. That's going to remain their biggest strength this year. But they also have an all-time offensive engine in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, by the way, had one of the great guard seasons we've ever seen last year and can really only improve. His regular season was flawless, but when we talk about the totality of his campaign, he can be more consistent this time around in the playoffs as a three-point shooter, and I'd actually expect him to be. He can be more consistent as a decision maker and playmaker. He had some high highs there in the playoffs and figured things out as series went along, but he started some of those series a little bit slower as a decision maker. Now that he's seen a lot of these defensive coverages, he's got another year of experience in a deep playoff run all the way to the title. I think he'll be even cleaner and more consistent there. But this past season, this dude already got them to a 128 offensive rating in the minutes that he played without J-Dub, With him as the lone creator, he is so ridiculously efficient as a scorer. He can do so with such overwhelming volume as a self-creator while never turning the ball over, while demanding such ridiculous amounts of defensive attention that he can make simple reads to create great shots for his teammates, that it's just an incredible formula for this team to run it back. You've got one of the best defenses we've ever seen, and you've got an offensive engine who can do that for you, who can single-handedly elevate you to that level on that side of the ball, even though there are some questions around him. That's how you win the title, despite the team shooting under 34% from three in the playoffs, and despite Chet's offensive inconsistencies, and even some of J-Dub's offensive inconsistencies, although he played quite well down the stretch in the playoffs. It's just the best bet of any team to be able to achieve the kind of dominance that they did last year again. That being said, there are a lot of interesting aspects to how OKC can go from the favorite this year, running it back, to an overwhelming favorite, which they absolutely have the potential to do. What's the first key swing factor that stands out to you there, Logan?
I think it is the improvement that we get from Chet Holmgren. I mean, I think that's the thing that could kick this team up a notch. When I look at, because I don't. You talk about swing factors. The Thunder are just so solid. Like, they're rock solid. They are as rock solid of a champion that I can remember in a long time. You know, we haven't had repeat champions in, what is it? Is it 7, 8 seasons now? It's been a long time since the Warriors.
17, 18 Warriors.
So that's what the Thunder are chasing, right? They are chasing the first team to be able to do that since that team. And that was a historically great champion. I expect this to be another historically great season. And they have such tremendous personnel. But I think the thing that could kick them up a notch really is Chet imposing himself physically and just asserting himself more offensively. The Thunder do have an established hierarchy, which is what I think is interesting about Chet getting himself more involved and being more impactful offensively, because it is so much Shai is going to dictate every possession offensively. And then when Shai's not on the court, J-Dub's going to take over some. And even when they overlap, J-Dub's going to run some offense. The next step really to me is weaponizing Chet to his fullest extent, involving him in the action more consistently, letting him dictate and run pick and roll at a higher volume. Not that the Thunder necessarily need this, but I could think it could just add a new dimension that would make their offense more dynamic and more dangerous and more volatile. And Chet's super talented. I mean, before he got injured at the beginning of this year, it was a really small sample size, but he was getting downhill. He was being aggressive. He was physically big bodying guys. Really encouraging stuff. And so that's the leap to me. And then seeing that manifest itself, not only from Chet, but Chet and J-Dub both when it comes into the playoffs. I thought they were really good playoff runs from both of those young players, from Chet and J-Dub, especially what J-Dub gave you in the NBA Finals. But I think it can be more consistent, and I think they can just be more impactful offensively throughout 4 series. So that, to me, is the biggest swing factor in the positive way to where this team could be a lot better. If Chet takes a major offensive leap and starts imposing himself more, and if he's just healthy, because I think consistency is, especially in basketball, can really be interrelated with just being available. And Chet has unfortunately gotten bit by the injury bug a few times now in his career. I think a big part of that development is just going to be him staying available and being on the court. And then with that, I think a lesser swing factor is J-Dub's offensive improvement, just because I think J-Dub is closer to the fully realized version of what he's going to be, more so than Chet.
Chet is absolutely the first guy who I look at with his team, and specifically offensively, because defensively I already think that he is a top 2 guy on the planet. I thought that what he did in this entire season, but especially in the playoffs, was utterly exceptional on that side of the ball. But there is clearly significant room for offensive improvement. And this is a guy who is oozing with talent on that side of the ball. He has got genuinely unique speed for being 7'1". He has unique fluidity and body control for that size. His ball handling is very impressive. And so you have these moments of him being able to put the ball on the floor, get past people off the bounce, spin in the lane, finish with his length, and it's all so impressive. And then you add on top of that the dimension of the legitimate jump shooting that you get from him and the play finishing that you get from him around the rim, and there's just so much ability there. But when you get him in a playoff environment against really high-level physical defenses, we saw some of his issues exposed in the playoffs this past year. So there's a number of key areas I'm looking at him when it comes to his progression. Can he get more comfortable handling under pressure? Because there is a difference between being an awesome ball handler for 7'1" and being a guy who, in a playoff environment against physical defenses, applying ball pressure, is actually comfortable enough putting the ball on the floor to create advantages, get past people, not feel like you got to turn your back to the basket and stop your drive. And those were issues for Chet this past year. He was challenged in that way. He's got to be able to actually do more off the bounce in the playoffs going forward to take that next step, and a lot of that is related to his ball handling, but also driving through physicality. Got to get a little bit better. And also just his decision-making, his processing. There were times where we saw him force drives that he shouldn't have. There were times where we saw him miss reads, and I was disappointed in that because I viewed Chet as a pretty good passing prospect for being a big. I think we've seen flashes of that with him running the big on big pick and roll, right? He can make some of those reads and passes to Hartenstein that not a lot of bigs can make, but he's got to be more consistent there as a processor, as a passer. And he is a very good jump shooter. There's no denying that, right? We see it in the regular season. This guy shoots 38% from three on solid volume. You see it with the free throw numbers overall in the very high 70s. But then we have seen him struggle in back-to-back postseasons as a jump shooter. The thing that I specifically look at is his ability to speed up the release on that jumper, because despite his height, his release point is not very high and it is pretty slow. So sometimes he can struggle shooting against contests. He can get affected in a way that you would like to see him not be affected going forward. And I just think there's a little bit of mechanical work to be done overall. The other thing that stands out to me is sometimes his shot comes out very flat and he can leave it short, especially I think when he's a little bit nervous or maybe tired, doesn't fully have his legs under him. So we know the shooting talent that he is, but I also don't think you can ignore some of these issues that have popped up in back-to-back postseasons now. We already saw him work on his mechanics going into year 2. I'd like to see some more tinkering going into year 3. Those are, to me, like the foundational pieces that he's got to get better at. And then kind of the ultimate upside with him is, okay, can he become a legitimate mismatch attacker for you? Because right now he just doesn't have the strength. He doesn't have the post game to punish switches. He's not going to beat guards with his quickness and off the bounce game. That has to be done more so through physicality, leveraging his size. I don't really see him adding significantly there this year, maybe down the line, but he's always going to be a skinny SOB. The post game hasn't developed for him up to this point. So we'll see. Again, that's kind of like a over the top skill that he could add. And then I would like to see him improve as a screener. This is another thing where, again, slight frame, but he basically slips every screen, and he's never going to be Isaiah Hartenstein as a screener, obviously. But if he could just be a bit more physical, create a bit more separation for the ball handler, spring those guys free more, I think he would be much more viable overall as a pick and roll partner, where he has all of the scoring dimensions you want there, right? As a pick and pop big, as a fluid roller to the rim with great size who can absolutely finish around the basket. But if he's not freeing up his guys, then he's not going to be that primary pick and roll partner, because they're not really creating advantages as they would like out of pick and roll. So I'm high on Chet. I'm very high on Chet. I always have been. And I am optimistic because I think you said it well, man. Health is a significant component in all this. I will not be convinced that it was a coincidence that Chet came out the gates this year looking like a monster offensively, hyper aggression, showing a level of production and confidence that we hadn't seen from him before, being so effective as a driver with more actions designed for him to run through him. And then he gets hurt. Not just that, he breaks his pelvis 10 games into the year, has to come back after missing 50 games, and he doesn't look the same offensively. You give him a full, healthy offseason, and I do think that we'll see improvement. And if he gets to a place where he's like a consistent 19, 20 point per game scorer, it's hard to imagine anybody beating OKC. That level of production from Chet with all of the different good things he can do for you offensively, just an absolute monster.
I thought people were way too hard on Chet when it came to the playoffs, too, because I knew he had his struggles offensively, but I think when you look at his entire season within context and what he was able to do coming back from that pelvic injury, it's really impressive because I think it speaks to a level of just physical and mental toughness and resilience that Chet has to come back from that. Like, that is an injury that not only is going to hinder you physically when it does come time to come back, but it's going to hurt you mentally, and it's going to hinder your confidence. And so I get that he hasn't lived up to the lofty expectations offensively that were set for him when he was coming out of college. But I thought the level that he was able to reach defensively and be good enough offensively was really impressive when you consider all the context of the entirety of the season.
He was the best defender in the playoffs, and I don't even think that that's arguable. So the guy was still delivering you great value, but I have consistently said Chet has top 10 potential, and his path to reaching that is obviously all about the offense because defensively, he's already one of the absolute best on the planet. So I'm not expecting a monumental offensive leap this year from Chet. I think it's going to be a multi-year process for him. But I do think that he can improve on the margins in some of these areas and be better next time we see him in a playoff run. I do also look at J-Dub's offensive consistency as just something to monitor with this team. Again, we're talking about things that can put them over the top because Chet already had offensive issues this past year in the playoffs and they won the title. And J-Dub still was up and down offensively in the playoffs, although he finished strong, but they won the title, right? They got to a game 7 against Denver when he played really well and he was really good from that point forward, but they got there in spite of J-Dub being pretty terrible through the first 6 games of that series. But from that point forward, starting with game 7, he gave you 23, 6, and 4 on 55% true shooting over the last 13 games of the playoffs. I thought that was encouraging. I thought that was impressive. And I loved seeing him play all the way downhill late in the playoffs, committing to legitimately pressuring the rim, getting all the way to the basket, getting to the free throw line at a higher rate. I want to see that more consistently from J-Dub because he's got the mid-range game. He loves the mid-range game, but sometimes he falls in love with it too much and he can become overly reliant on his difficult shot making. I thought he was able to give himself a higher offensive floor late in the playoffs by playing with that sort of downhill force. I also am looking at how consistent his jumper is this year because 2024, J-Dub shot the ball at an elite clip. He averaged 1.13 points per jump shot. In 2025, that number dropped to 0.99. That's the difference between an 84th percentile efficiency jump shooter and 47th percentile. So it's a big difference. He went through a pretty brutal slump last year as a jump shooter, and he broke out of it, but then he shot the ball pretty poorly from deep in the playoffs. It was certainly inconsistent, and he ended up at like 30% from beyond the arc. So that's an important component for him. I do think he'll have something of a bounce back as a jump shooter. And then obviously, like, he's just very crucial in the non-Shai minutes. He got them to a 114 offensive rating when he was on the floor without Shai this year. That number dramatically improved as the year went on, but he is so vital as a creator there because they just don't have another ball handler and shot creator who can step up in those minutes. Overall, I feel good about the level that J-Dub played at in the most important moments in games last year, and I feel positive about him also probably making some marginal improvements. He doesn't have the same potential for growth or need for growth offensively that a Chet Holmgren does, but I still think he can get a little bit more consistent in some of these areas. There's one other guy, though, Logan, who you do look at, and he's a wild card in all of this. Nicola Topic, you mentioned briefly. What are you expecting to see from him this year, and what potential value could he bring to the Thunder?
I'm really excited to talk about Topic. Last thing I wanted to bring up on J-Dub real quick, though.
Yeah.
The reason is just there's a little bit of inherent volatility with the shot selection that J-Dub likes in those bench minutes is he is just so reliant on that mid-range jumper, and he's not as great of an advantage creator as SGA is, and that's why you see that little bit of slip when SGA is off the court. But I do think he can get better in those areas. Like, he's so good at getting to those looks. I think J-Dub's going to continue to grow as like in terms of his touch and mid-range and tough range shot making. So there is a leap there, but I'm really excited about Topic, man, especially with what we saw out of him in Summer League. Granted, you need to take Summer League with a grain of salt. It is competitive basketball. These are guys fighting for their lives, but it isn't the stiffest competition. That being said, Topic has a level of poise and control of the game in the half court that I really, really like. Not even in the half court, with the ball in his hands. I'll say it like that. Full court, when he gets the ball, when he's bringing it up, the guy's a really great hit-ahead passer and really great at pushing the tempo, which I think for a team with the roster construction like Oklahoma City with an elite defense, you slot a guy like Topic in there, you could create some really easy stop-and-go buckets where they get a stop, boom, Topic is flying up the court and kicking to an open shooter, or he's just throwing the ball up to a guy who's sprinting down the floor. So I think he should be really good for creating transition opportunities. But in the half court, this guy's 6'6". He's kind of chunky. He's strong. Like, he can physically move guys around, especially out of the pick and roll.
How about compact, Logan? Chunky,
yeah,
how about compact?
I just meant, like, he can bump guys around. I didn't mean it as a negative term, but I like it. I like my ball handlers to be a little bit thicker, to have that kind of strength. Because strength is just something that you can't stop. If you can't match up with that, Topic is going to move you a little bit around. He's very methodical. He's very patient, and he's very poised. I love his control in the half court and just the way he works in the intermediate areas to get to his shots. Scoring isn't his specialty, though, to me. It really is the playmaking and decision-making where he can just see these angles and these cross-court passes, and he's always going to find open shooters. To me, the bread and butter of his scoring skill set is his touch and his layups. When he gets like inside 10 feet and can really use his body to bump guys and then get into his layups. So I think the big swing thing for him as a player is obviously his shot, how reliable he is going to be as a perimeter shooter and scorer. But I like him a lot more than a guy that maybe you would compare him to that the Thunder drafted a couple years ago in Josh Giddey, where I trust him more with the ball in his hands. I think he's going to be a better scorer, and I think he can just physically impose himself and create more advantages than a guy like Giddey can. I just think he's a better scorer than Giddey is. And don't get me wrong, I thought Giddey was improved this year, but I do think Topic is going to be better, and I really like the physicality and the confidence that he plays with. And when you're talking about a guy like Jalen Williams, where if you're going to criticize anything of his, it would be him in the bench units where he is the lone creator. And so you look at this Thunder team and what they need, it really is a guy like Topic who, unfortunately, the Thunder just keep getting bit by these injury bugs for their rookies. Chet misses an entire year with an injury. Topic misses a year with an entire injury. Their rookie that I was very fond of, Thomas Sorber, is going to miss the entire year with an injury. So it is unfortunate, but it would have been nice to see him last year. I think he is going to add a new dimension to this bench unit and kick the offense up a notch in his minutes, man. I'm really excited to see Topic on the floor with this team.
There's not a lot that you could criticize about this Thunder team. There's very few needs that you could point to. But one of the couple of things that we have talked about is the value of adding another ball handler, because there is such a burden on Shai and there is such a burden on J-Dub. If you look at just the volume that those guys take on when the other guy is off the floor, it's pretty insane. Per 75 possessions, well, this is just unbelievable. Shai is a basketball god, dude. Without J-Dub, 40 points, 7.5 assists, 67% true shooting, and the Thunder had a 128 offensive rating in the regular season.
I'm sorry, what is that stat?
That's per 75 possessions. When Shai was on the floor without J-Dub, he averaged 40 points, 7.5 assists, 67% true shooting, and led them to a 128 offensive rating.
That's crazy, bro.
It's absolutely unfathomable how great he was. And then you look at J-Dub in the minutes without Shai, and his volume is also massive. It's obviously not nearly that, but 29 points per 75, 7 assists per 75, 56% true shooting, and overall got them to be good enough in those minutes when he was the primary creator on the floor. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, those results overall are quite good. And in the regular season, they were. Shai did his job at an A++ level. J-Dub did his job at whatever, like a B+ level. And they were one of the elite regular season offenses. But they ran into more offensive issues in the playoffs. They still won the title, but it wasn't as seamless and smooth and consistently elite for them on that side of the ball. And I do think part of that is, at times, such an extreme reliance on Shai without other proven creators, ball handlers, and an over-reliance on J-Dub when he isn't always the most consistent as a second option or as a first option in the non-Shai minutes. So There's just moments where you felt like it'd be nice to have one more guy on the floor who could handle, who could make a play. Topic theoretically could be that guy. And you mentioned the Giddey comparison. I think that's one that we saw a lot of. I actually remember it's one that you made, Logan, about Topic as a prospect. And I said, no, I like Topic more. And here's why. Significantly more. I liked him. Number one, I think the shooting indicators with him are significantly better than they were for Giddey as a prospect. Topic was an elite free throw shooter, and his mechanics are not broken in the way that they were with Giddey. Now, they're still not super fluid, and he shot the ball poorly from deep in Summer League. So it's still a big question with him, but I do like the indicators there more than I did with Giddey. But the bigger difference probably is that I just think he's a much better downhill scorer. As a driver, as a finisher, this guy has consistently been very effective, as you mentioned. So the overall scoring skill set is just better with him. And then he has all the same inventive, creative passing brilliance that Giddey did, but he pairs that with more of an actual scoring threat and ability to get into the paint, pressure the defense in that way. He's got the really good size to make a lot of those impressive reads that only a bigger ball handler could see as well. So there's a lot to like with him offensively, but still, even though like his Summer League was impressive in some ways, and there were some great highlights, and he gave you 11, 3, and 6, he also did shoot 33% from the field and 21% from three. And that's against Summer League competition. And we talk about generally the standard with year two guys, even though Topic, well, he's very young, and also he's going into basically his rookie year. Nevertheless, he was drafted in 2024. And generally, we want to see those guys kind of look a level above the competition in Summer League. I don't know that I could say that with him, and I think that you still saw some of the flaws that he does have as a shooter and as a scorer, and that's going to be the question. Can he shoot and score at the necessary level to be an actual bench ball handler for this team, to give them 12 to 15 minutes, and to actually make an impact? And especially, can he justify that sort of a role when the bar for a subpar defender to get on the floor for OKC is so ridiculously high? You look at a guy like Isaiah Joe, one of the elite shooters in basketball. It's hard for him to get on the floor. Like, the depth here is just so ridiculous, and they hang their hat above all else on having no defensive weak points and being able to absolutely cause havoc on that side of the floor. So if you are costing them in that way, and you're not justifying it with real offensive value, and there's questions about, okay, what can Topic do off ball when he's playing alongside a Shai or a J-Dub if he can't make shots off the catch? Like, I genuinely don't know what we're going to see out of Topic this year. I am optimistic about his talent, and I like his potential to fit into this role. And by the way, I think even if Giddey had been able to fully embrace like just a bench ball handler role, that would have been better. But I don't like Giddey. I like Topic more. But the point was, he also was insistent upon, I want to be a starter, which meant he was being put in a role that was even worse for him considering his skill set. I do think that Topic just has more offensive juice as a scorer potentially, but it also wouldn't surprise me at all if he just wasn't in the playoff rotation this year, if he wasn't quite ready, because the bar is really damn high to get on the floor. What I will say, though, is when we talk about the superpowers of this OKC team, absolutely, it is one of the best defenses we've ever seen. Absolutely, it is Shai being a top 3 player in the game. Absolutely, and one of the best offensive players that we've seen. It is also supreme lineup versatility. And if Topic is what we hope and think he could be this year, then he is another look that they can throw at you, right? There's so many looks that they can give you. They can go double big. They can go Chet at the 5, which is when I think they're at their best. They can go full on small ball for short stretches. And there are so many different bench players who they can implement. They can go with Caruso for big minutes, which I think they'll do again in the playoffs because he's so destructive defensively. They can go with an Aaron Wiggins or an Isaiah Joe for more of an offensive punch. There's a lot of options. Topic potentially could be another one of those guys bringing a unique dimension of ball handling for this team and a little bit more offensive juice.
I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, that was the last point I was going to make on OKC, is the fact that they just have so many different looks that they can go with. Their guard lineups, their forward lineups, if they're going Chet, if they're going double big. I think it is a super strength of this team. And you make a great point about Topic too. I mean, if Topic pops, it's like icing on the cake, right? It's like garnish for something. Like, it's just extra. It's just added value that you have in here. Even if Topic doesn't crack it, I mean, I still think this team can can win the title. Like, he's not
question.
he's not that huge of a swing factor, but he could kick them up a notch if he's really solid year one.
Not only can they win the title without Topic being a rotation
I'm expecting
piece,
it. Yeah, they're definitely
still be my
favorite. For sure.
That's what I want to hammer home here. We are talking about these swing factors. They are the difference between the Thunder being the favorite to win the title and a team that is like so great that I can't see anybody else beating them. They're not there right now because I do think a team we're about to talk about very shortly got significantly better and poses a major threat. But I absolutely see a world in which I look at the Thunder and I'm like, there's just no way that anybody's beating them. And already I just couldn't pick anybody to beat them because their formula is so proven. And lineup versatility, man, it is at a premium in today's NBA. Depth is at a premium in today's NBA. The ability to mix and match and throw different looks at different opponents and be able to counter and disrupt whatever they want to do, it's so damn important. And the Thunder are just the best at it in basketball. The one final swing factor I would mention with them is their three-point shooting as a team. Because if you just look at a lot of the key contributors here, Shai, Chet, J-Dub, Caruso, Cason Wallace, even Aaron Wiggins, although he had a very good three-point shooting season, really increased his volume. Like, all of these guys can be kind of up and down as three-point shooters. But overall, last two regular seasons, they've had elite shooting seasons in the regular season. They were top 6 in threes made, top 6 in three-point percentage in the regular season last year. And then they struggled in the playoffs and they still won the title. I do believe the playoffs last year, the level they shot at, was pretty much their floor overall as a shooting team. But I don't think you can deny that they can have lulls there. And I think it'll be better this time around in the playoffs. But it is not impossible that they have some ups and downs there. And if you're facing a really strong opponent, maybe that could be the thing that gets them. But I still just think that their margin is easily the greatest in basketball. With a player the caliber of Shai, with second and third stars who I think are going to be better this year, with the best depth in the sport, with the best lineup versatility, with a defense that is like so clearly the best unit in basketball. Whoever ends up being the best offense, like the difference between them and the pack on that side of the ball will not be the same as the difference between the Thunder and every other group defensively. It's just such a ridiculously high floor that it gives them. Their ability to dominate the possession game we saw so consistently. They're just getting up more shots than their opponents, and they're turning these turnovers into high quality transition opportunities. I'm just talking about all the things that make the Thunder great, but I don't want us to forget that. I don't want us to look at the improvements of some of these other teams and say, oh, maybe I'll get cheeky. Maybe I'll pick somebody other than OKC. I just couldn't do it. When I think Shai will be better in the playoffs this year, Chet will be better, I think they'll shoot better, and they retained literally everybody from a team that already won the title, won 68 games, had the second best net rating in NBA history. Considering all that, I just have to pick the Thunder this year, and it's just going to be a question of how dominant, how great they are, how much they can improve in all of these areas. And again, it's insane to be talking about improvement from a team that was already that great.
Real quick, just because I don't think I said this off top, I have the Thunder winning 65 games, and they're going to be my 1 seed and title favorite as well.
Look, I'm not going to compare them to the peak Warriors, okay? That's ridiculous. That's the greatest team ever assembled when you're talking about 2017 specifically. We never seen a collection of top-end talent like what they had 2017, 2018, and would have had 2019 if KD didn't get hurt. But there is kind of a feeling with the Thunder right now of just expecting absolute regular season dominance that I haven't had about a team since the 2015 to 2017 Warriors. And it is because they're so damn talented and they can still get better. But it is also because, like, they're so young and they play with so much energy and they've got such great depth that it's like, not only are they the best team come playoffs, they're even better than everybody else in the regular season because they go full throttle, because that defensive identity is so relentless night after night after night. And I just don't see that changing this year. Like, yes, reigning champions will take their foot off the gas a fair bit throughout the course of NBA history in the regular season. The Thunder are like the last team that I would expect to do that because this is part of their identity. They're basketball psychos. When you got Caruso, when you got Cason Wallace, when you got J-Dub playing big minutes, like, it's just what they do. they want to be the best versions of themselves every night. And I think we'll see that again this year.